Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we're diving into the transformative power of radical candor in the workplace and how it can elevate feedback culture to new heights. All right, let's get straight into it. Today, we will explore the core principles of giving and receiving feedback in the workplace, specifically through the lens of radical candor. Too often, managers struggle to balance empathy with directness, and that can lead to team dysfunction or stalled growth. By learning how to care personally while challenging directly, we can create an environment where people feel supported and pushed to do their best work. Let's dive into how learning and development, L&D professionals, can use these insights to help managers and teams thrive.
Thank you for setting the stage. I'm looking forward to hearing how L&D experts can adapt these practices. Shall we begin with the first question?
Absolutely. First, can you give us a concise definition of radical candor and explain why it matters so much for leaders and L&D professionals?
Radical candor is the practice of showing genuine care for team members, or learners, on a personal level, while also giving direct, honest feedback. This approach matters because it addresses the common dilemma of wanting to be nice without withholding important insights. When leaders fail to challenge their teams directly, they may slip into what's called ruthless empathy, being kind but avoiding critical feedback that sparks improvement. By combining personal care with direct challenges, leaders can create an atmosphere of trust, respect, and growth. L&D professionals can leverage these ideas to teach leaders and managers how to communicate openly, which fosters better performance and happier employees.
Thank you for that overview. Can you describe the two core elements, caring personally and challenging directly, and why both are essential?
Caring personally means taking an active, genuine interest in each team member's well-being and professional growth. This goes beyond workplace formalities. You learn what motivates them, understand their aspirations, and show compassion for their challenges. Challenging directly involves offering clear, specific feedback, even when doing so is uncomfortable. Balancing these elements ensures that employees feel valued and know exactly where to improve. If either element is missing, feedback can either be too soft to be useful or too harsh to build trust.
That makes sense. Could you outline the four quadrants Kim Scott mentions? Radical candor, ruinous empathy, obnoxious aggression, and manipulative insincerity.
Certainly, these four quadrants are based on the interplay between caring personally, vertical axis, and challenging directly, horizontal axis. Radical candor, with high care and high challenge, is ideal because you offer direct and helpful feedback while showing genuine concern for the individual. Ruinous empathy, where there's high care but low challenge, means you're kind and supportive, yet avoid the tough conversations that drive growth. This might feel okay in the short term, but harms development over time. Obnoxious aggression, which is low care paired with high challenge, involves blunt feedback without empathy. It can produce results quickly, but strains relationships and undermines trust. Manipulative insincerity, with low care and low challenge, is the worst scenario, because you neither care about the person nor provide honest feedback, creating a toxic atmosphere that erodes morale.
Thank you for clarifying the quadrants. How can L&D professionals help managers identify which quadrant they currently fall into?
L&D professionals can start by introducing simple self-assessment tools. Managers reflect on recent feedback situations. Did they withhold criticism out of discomfort? Were they too blunt in delivering feedback without showing any personal concern? Workshops and role-play scenarios can be incredibly valuable. You can have managers practice giving and receiving feedback, then analyze which quadrant that exchange resembled. By recognizing patterns, managers become more aware of their tendencies and can work toward radical candor.
Great. Once managers see where they fall, what first steps can they take to shift toward radical candor?
One key step is learning to deliver feedback immediately, rather than letting issues fester. Timeliness shows respect and reduces the risk of building resentment. Another step is asking for feedback in return. When a manager says, "How could I have done better here?" or "What feedback do you have for me?" It sets the tone of mutual respect. Managers can also show they care personally by making time for one-on-one conversations, genuinely listening, and remembering details about each team member's life. Balancing these elements gradually moves leaders away from extremes and into the radical candor zone.
Understood. How does Kim Scott suggest we balance praise versus criticism when applying radical candor?
Scott emphasizes that both praise and criticism should be specific. Effective praise means highlighting precisely what someone did well and why it matters. Vague compliments like, good job, lack context. Similarly, criticism should identify behavior, explain its impact, and suggest improvement. It is also essential to maintain a healthy ratio of praise to criticism. Consistent, constructive praise builds confidence and motivation, making it easier for team members to accept criticism when it's delivered. By weaving both into regular conversations, managers avoid only giving feedback when something goes wrong.
That's helpful. How can an L&D department build a culture of radical candor at the organizational level, not just among individual managers?
L&D can play a significant role by embedding feedback training into onboarding and ongoing development programs. This might include formal workshops on giving and receiving feedback, plus regular refreshers where employees practice these skills in safe, structured environments. Additionally, leaders at the top must model the behavior. It trickles down if senior executives consistently invite feedback and demonstrate radical candor. L&D can reinforce this by coaching executives on transparency about their mistakes and how they used feedback to grow. This top-down approach signals that candor is not just permitted, it's celebrated as a core value.
Excellent. Could you share a brief example that illustrates the impact of ruinous empathy in a corporate setting?
A classic example might be a manager who notices an employee repeatedly delivering late or subpar reports. The manager, wanting to be nice, avoids direct criticism. The reports continue to be late, and the employee remains unaware of the problem's seriousness. Eventually, senior leadership notices the trend, and the employee faces unexpected consequences, such as a poor performance review or even termination. In this scenario, the manager's ruthless empathy prevented the employee from getting timely feedback and improving. It also damaged the manager's credibility, as their inaction allowed the issue to persist.
That's a powerful illustration. On the flip side, how might obnoxious aggression appear and why is it so damaging?
Obnoxious aggression can occur when a manager is straightforward, but doesn't communicate any personal care. For instance, a manager might publicly berate someone for making a small mistake, focusing only on what went wrong without showing empathy. While the directness is there, this style alienates employees by creating fear and resentment. It can lead to a toxic culture where team members are afraid to speak up or take risks. Even if performance improves in the short term, it's not sustainable. Trust erodes, and people eventually disengage or leave.
Understood. Let's talk about practical tips. How can managers incorporate personal care into everyday interactions?
One straightforward tactic is to dedicate time in each one-on-one to something unrelated to projects or tasks. Ask, "How are you doing this week? Anything on your mind?" And listen attentively. Over time, this shows you're invested in them as individuals, not just employees. Another way is to remember specific details: birthdays, family events, personal interests, and follow up. For example, if you know a team member's child is starting school, you can check how that's going. These small gestures demonstrate genuine care and build stronger relationships, making direct feedback palatable.
Thank you for that. How can managers practice challenging directly in a way that feels respectful rather than confrontational?
It begins with clarity. Be precise about the behavior or result that needs to change. Instead of saying, "Your presentations are bad," a manager might say, "In the last presentation, the visuals were unclear, and the key data points were not highlighted. That made it hard for the team to see your main arguments." Additionally, managers should frame the critique around growth and next steps, suggesting concrete improvements or offering support. For instance, I'd recommend breaking your slides down into 3 key points and using charts to illustrate your data. Let me know if you'd like any resources or a quick review before your next presentation. This specificity makes the feedback feel constructive and actionable.
Great. How can L&D teams give managers the confidence to initiate these candid conversations, especially if they've never done so?
L&D can run role-play sessions where managers practice delivering different types of feedback. These sessions help people become comfortable with Candor's language and body language. Additionally, providing structured frameworks, like checklists or conversation starters, can reduce anxiety. For example, a quick bullet point list of best practices. Be timely, stay specific, focus on behaviors, and invite dialogue can act like training wheels until managers build their style. Lastly, internal mentorship programs, where experienced managers guide newer ones, can reinforce these skills in real-world contexts.
Thanks. What role does actively soliciting employee feedback play in the radical candor model?
It's crucial. Leaders who ask for feedback show humility and a genuine desire to improve, creating a two-way street. This sends a strong signal that feedback is not just something you do to people, but something you exchange with them. Soliciting feedback also normalizes open communication, making it easier for team members to voice concerns or ideas. If a manager routinely asks, "How can I better support you?" or "What can I do differently?" employees are more likely to trust that sharing concerns or suggestions won't be met with retaliation.
Agreed. How might L&D facilitate an environment where peer-to-peer radical candor, not just top-down feedback, is encouraged?
One approach is designing group exercises that require collaborative feedback, such as peer review on small projects or hackathons where everyone critiques each other's work. L&D can introduce ground rules, like focusing on behaviors, not personalities, and remind participants to show empathy. Creating a formal buddy system or peer coaching program can also normalize this practice. When employees frequently exchange tips and observations, they learn that feedback is a regular part of their workflow. Over time, this helps embed a culture where everyone feels responsible for the collective success.
Great advice. In your opinion, what's the biggest misunderstanding people have when they hear radical candor?
Many assume it's just about being brutally honest all the time. They mistakenly think they can say anything, no matter how harsh, as long as it's truthful. But radical candor is about balancing that honesty with genuine care for the individual. When people fixate solely on the challenge directly piece, they might drift into obnoxious aggression. Real radical candor requires you to deliver direct feedback within a framework of empathy and respect, so it comes across as help rather than an attack.
Very insightful. Could you share an example of how one company successfully adopted radical candor practices?
Sure. One tech startup instituted weekly candor huddles. In these short sessions, teams would openly discuss what went well that week and what could be improved. The expectation was that every person would offer one piece of praise and one piece of critique to someone else, all framed around performance and behavior. Within a few weeks, team members reported feeling more connected and better informed about how their work impacted others. These sessions helped them course-correct quickly instead of waiting for quarterly reviews. The emphasis on consistent, respectful feedback reduced tension and increased collaboration.
That's a great story. How does radical candor tie into the broader objectives of learning and development professionals?
L&D aims to help employees grow, adapt, and excel. Radical candor directly supports that by fostering a continuous feedback loop, accelerating skill acquisition and mindset shifts. If managers and employees talk candidly about areas for improvement, the learning path is clearer. Moreover, a culture that values open dialogue is often more receptive to training initiatives, workshops, and new tools. When feedback is seen as a regular part of daily work, learning becomes embedded in the organizational DNA rather than confined to formal sessions.
Perfect. If an L&D professional were to design a short workshop on radical candor, what key components would you recommend including?
First, start with a straightforward explanation of the concept. Define caring personally and challenge directly. Then, show them the four-quadrant framework so participants can see how different feedback styles map out. Next, incorporate scenario-based practice. Have participants role-play giving feedback in typical workplace situations, and then debrief on which quadrant they fell into. Lastly, provide resources like conversation scripts, do's and don'ts lists, and follow-up steps. This ensures participants have tangible takeaways they can implement immediately.
Great outline. What pitfalls should L&D teams watch out for when implementing radical candor training?
One pitfall is failing to engage senior leaders. If the top brass doesn't buy in, managers might see radical candor as mere theory rather than a genuine cultural shift. Another is neglecting the care personally component. If training sessions overemphasize directness, participants might interpret that as permission to be blunt or rude. Additionally, L&D teams must address fear. Some employees worry that giving candid feedback will damage relationships or hurt their career prospects. Addressing these fears with clear guidelines, psychological safety measures, and support from leadership is essential for lasting impact.
Thanks. How can L&D professionals measure the success or impact of radical candor initiatives over time?
L&D can track metrics like employee engagement scores, retention rates, and the frequency of constructive feedback exchanges. Surveys or pulse checks can gauge whether people feel comfortable speaking up and find feedback sessions valuable. Also, qualitative measures, like anecdotal evidence of improved team communication, are essential. Leaders might report that once difficult conversations are happening more frequently and productively. Gathering stories of positive outcomes and linking them to training efforts can help build a compelling case for continued investment in radical candor.
That's very helpful. As a final question, could you share a key takeaway for L&D professionals who want to champion radical candor in their organizations?
The biggest takeaway is that radical candor isn't a one-off initiative. It's a mindset shift requiring consistent reinforcement. L&D professionals are perfectly positioned to lead this cultural change by educating managers on the core principles, providing safe practice spaces, and championing honest two-way communication. It's also vital to remember that every organization is unique. Tailor your approach to your specific environment, leadership style, and team dynamics. With patience and persistence, cultivating a culture of genuine care and direct challenge can become a powerful engine for personal and organizational growth.
Thank you so much for these insights and examples. It's been a rich conversation with plenty of practical guidance for L&D professionals. We appreciate your time and expertise.
I'm glad I could help. Thank you for the opportunity to delve into these concepts. I hope L&D leaders find these strategies useful and can apply radical candor to create healthier, more productive workplaces.
And that wraps up today's podcast, where we explored how radical candor balances personal care with direct challenges to improve workplace communication and growth. Remember to keep fostering an environment of constructive feedback with support from leadership. Stay tuned for more updates.